Welcome to the next CFO, the podcast that picks the brains of top CFOs to learn the strategies, lessons, and stories that have shaped CFO's career thus far. I'm Rowan Tonkin. I'm the CMO here at Planful. And as you may have guessed, I'm actually a guest host today. I'm filling in for Matt Sledge. Matt's not here today because he's out on paternity leave. His wife and he have just welcomed a lovely new baby. So congrats, Matt. And thanks for letting me take over. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
So I know, we're always excited to get into the topics of finance here, but let's start with a few warm up questions. So I'd love to understand what's your favorite hobby?
So, my favorite hobby, I'm a big reader. I love to read science fiction, military history, economics. And then I also love sports. I went to the University of Alabama undergrad, Vanderbilt Business School. So, college sports is a big thing. And, fully with the tournament just finishing up, I was very excited. Not that
Awesome.
we didn't win it, but still, it was still fun.
Well, it's always fun to root on your team. It's something I've grown to love since I moved to the States. Is how passionate everyone is about their college. What are you reading right now?
So I'm always reading a couple of different books. I'm reading The Wars of Afghanistan. It's one of the ones, like history of the, kind of all the empire, well, all the countries that have been involved in Afghanistan. So military history is one of my big ones. And I'm also reading a book on Napoleon,
Yeah,
specifically Waterloo. So I love
awesome.
military history.
Yeah, I can recommend a kind of fiction nonfiction book which is called The Essex Dogs.
Ooh,
It was great. It's about some Essex mercenaries that are involved in kind of the English French War back in the day. So really interesting and written by a historian. So it's kind of got that factual element to it, which is really cool.
yeah, just wrote that down. And I'm always loving recommendations.
Yeah, no problems. Well, that's why I'm asking you. How do you, aside from reading, how do you unwind after a tough day running the business?
So I like to, kind of relax with the wife. We do watch some TV, but and then just kind of talk about things, catch up.
Yeah,
Uh, when it's warmer, I like playing golf, although I'm
yeah,
not that good. Our building has a golf simulator, so I go down and hit there when it's not so nice weather. But yeah, I love to stay active in different things like that too.
awesome, awesome. Well, I'm heading down south myself, so to go and play some golf. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, I'm glad the warm weather's back, so I can get back into it too.
Where are you going?
I'm actually going to, as in Alabama, I'm going to Georgia. I'll be playing at the University of Georgia Golf Club, Georgia Golf,
Oh, nice.
and some other places down there. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's nice. I haven't played golf on their campus, but they have a beautiful campus. I have been there for games, so
Yeah.
we won, by the way. So we understand.
All right. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Obviously you've gone from a Wall Street background to now mission driven work, advising C suites along the way. Can you walk us through that career journey? What was the moment or motivation that kind of pulled you or pushed you into Rethink Food?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town in Alabama, and my parents instilled in me, to always give back to the community in some way, in some fashion. So when I worked at Merrill Finance Department, I actually used to volunteer with another nonprofit focused on food. And so, kind of got an understanding of, food as a first order need. People really need, access to good, healthy food in order to, to actualize themselves. And so, always had thought about, kind of how can I do more? Like I said, volunteer, but it's like always wanted to do more. And then COVID came, and I had left Merrill Lynch at the time, but COVID came, and as you remember, there were the food lines. There was a lot of food
Yeah.
insecurity, a lot more awareness, and Rethink Food, where I'm CFO now, was recruiting for the CFO because exhibited some tremendous growth. A lot of people became much more aware of food security. They gave a lot of funding. The board recognized they need a much, a more established senior financial leader to come in and lead the company. And it was a great opportunity for me to, do more, do something, particularly at a very trying time, but also use my financial skills for good. So it was kind of a meeting of the need in the mind and my interest and being able
Yeah.
to do something important.
That's awesome. I love it when your kind of purpose and your position end up getting a match. It's a wonderful thing. And so obviously going from from the private sector into nonprofit leadership, what's been the biggest challenge or shift or adjustment that you've had to make?
Yeah, I would say that, one of the biggest things is, coming from large corporations, everything's kind of siloed. Everything is really structured. You have a lot of resources. In nonprofit, you don't have as many resources. It's a lot less structure. We've built a lot more structure now that they've been here, processes, procedures. But just being able to do more, being more creative, I think it really helps you in your career. Also, working for a small organization, you get to see so many aspects of the business
Yeah.
other than just finance department, and that really helps you, I think, to grow as a professional.
Awesome. And so the mission obviously of Rethink Food, for those that don't know, is centered on reducing food waste and fighting the food insecurity that you talked about. Obviously that creativity that you get to play is how does finance deliver that creativity and scaling the mission?
I think a big part of what we do is bringing a lot more rigor to the organization,
Hmm.
uh, being some kind of thought leader because we're for my what I think is really important for finance is not just putting together the financial reports, reporting on the numbers. It's about being a strategic partner and thought leader for the department heads, and so really helping work with department heads as well as the other members of senior leadership to understand what are the drivers of the business. How do we, increase our revenues? How do we increase our funding? How do we cut costs to be more, better stewards of the money that's entrusted with us? So really helping to, kind of really help the business to think about how do you grow revenues? How do you cut costs so that you can have a lot more to be able to have greater impact?
And that, I mean, that's not new in a Wall Street sense, right? Like, grow the top line, cut the bottom line. How does it differ, like truly differ in a nonprofit environment?
Yeah, I think that, you know, for-profit companies get a bad rap for this profit mentality.
Yeah.
But, and a lot of, nonprofits, you're mission driven. A lot of people who are, drawn to work, for a nonprofit, really focus on mission as they should be. But but one of the things that kind of gets lost sometimes is that, the more, either revenue you grow or expenses you cut, that gives you so many more resources to be able
Mhm.
to invest, to be able to grow, to be able to have more impact.
Mhm.
If you want and so a lot of people, because they don't come from that for profit or they don't have the as well versed with business background, it's a hard thing sometimes to impart because business does get a bad rap sometimes. I think for profit businesses.
And so when you think about, obviously ROI is a different kind of term in a nonprofit stance, right? You're looking for the impact, I guess.
Right. Right.
Um, is that how you think of it?
Yeah, we think of it from an impact standpoint. For us, is how many meals that we are able to provide to
Mhm.
communities, to people that need those meals. One of the other big part of our components that makes us unique is that we actually invest money into restaurants, and restaurants would then make meals that are distributed to community service organizations. So by making investments in those restaurants in the communities where they're helping to feed, it also helps them to be able to hire people to grow their business and like I said, truly invest and build communities. So,
Mhm.
how many communities are we really helping to build? Through our investments, as well as the meals that we provide for people who are, who need those meals. So, those are some of the bigger metrics that we really look at. And then also, we have a fleet of trucks. Our trucks pick up excess food. So, how much food do we divert from landfills, and then repurpose that food to be able to use to feed communities also?
So typically, folks would be talking about shareholder value. Now you're probably talking about donor value or contributor value. What does that look like in your financial statements that you're providing back to those key stakeholders?
So what we really focus on, like I said, one is the meals we create,
Mhm.
the dollars we invest in communities,
Yeah.
the impact to those communities, i.e., employment, or other metrics that we really track. And so, and then just kind of you know, those are the areas that, to be honest, we're most focused on as far as, metrics and things that we report on. And then also pounds of food diverted from landfills that also translates into water savings. So we do have other metrics that we particularly use for our corporate donors that we're very interested in, kind of their environmental impact.
And how does that translate to them for, their kind of ESG impact for them as a maybe for a profit business that is doing good and kind of investing in yourselves? What does that look like on their side?
So, a lot of corporations do have, certain goals that they're trying to show that they're good stewards of their environment. And so, how does that translate to, waste that's diverted, like I said, from landfills, that has a, clearly that has a carbon impact. Water that's diverted, or not used in landfills, also has an impact. So those are some of the things that, their companies are really focus on measuring and being able to report on to their stakeholders. And, we do give them the opportunity to, we give them the information because we do have a very robust data analytics department to be able
Right.
to provide information for them to be able to use for their stakeholders also.
And so how do you think of this is I am going off script here for those that don't know that that's typically what I do. So as you think about kind of having a robust data and analytics department, obviously that's a cost to the business in terms of that's money not spent on impact. But the flip side of that is that's also a way of leveraging the good that you're doing to go and share all the good that you're doing to drive donorship and drive contribution. Is that how you start to analyze kind of different investments and priorities across the business? Is kind of, well, if we do this and invest in this, it's going to grow the top line versus cutting the bottom line?
Yeah, because I guess we're unique in a certain way that we do look at different revenue sources. So, for example, when I talk about being able to provide data analytics to corporations, we do have certain corporations that actually do pay us nominal fee to pick up their
Yep.
excess food and then divert it from landfills. So for us, this is investment in the data analytics, to your point of, how does this help us to provide information that corporations would use, and then they're willing to pay us, a nominal fee to be able to not only take their excess, but also to provide them with the data that they need to be able to report to their stakeholders.
Mhm.
So we do look at everything, well, not everything, but a lot of things from the standpoint, in that case, for making investments, how does that help us to grow the top line? So, like, to every other business, there are some investments we are making to cut costs. But that specifically, we are looking more to how does it help us to grow the top line.
Yeah, awesome. And
And I know
so,
I talk a lot of business for profit jargon for a nonprofit person, but I think that's one of the things that makes me unique in my role, and
yeah.
it has helped me be successful and also our organization be successful.
Going from this, a Wall Street background, Merrill Lynch into not for profit, obviously has a lot of, like personal kind of motivations behind that. If you were mentoring someone who wanted to go through that same leap or same jump to kind of get to that purpose, mission driven work, what would you share with them about your experience? Like, what might be the surprises? What might be the similarities that you would talk about?
I think that one surprise is that when you come in, particularly if you're coming from large corporations, a lot of your medium sized nonprofits probably aren't as structured as you would be looking or you were used to in a large
Yeah.
corporation. You have to be a lot more nimble and flexible. You have to be able to roll up your sleeves. You have to sometimes be involved in other departments, and get involved and really enjoy that. If you don't really enjoy that, probably kind of difficult. So I would say that, not being overly structured, uh, open mind, being flexible, and then things change a lot in corporates, but it's very hard to when for example, it's very hard to forecast in nonprofit, particularly when so much of your revenue comes from donations.
Mhm.
Generally, if you're in a for-profit organization, when you have a product or service and you can kind of model out things, you kind of know how much cash is coming in. You can model out forecasts a lot better. You have to be a lot more flexible, particularly from a forecasting standpoint, because even though we have other revenue streams, a large part of our funding still comes from donations.
And how does that change the way you think about long-term planning? Obviously, in a more unpredictable, volatile kind of income situation, long-term planning becomes a bit more difficult. So how do you think about that for the company?
Yeah, so I think a lot of nonprofits, that's why you really want to build up a reserve because
Mm.
there are ups and downs, and then kind of the cost de jour may change, a couple years or every other year. And so you want to have reserves in place so that you can still fund your organization over a period of time. So I think a big part of nonprofit work is, one, really being able to build reserves, think about how to build reserves because there's rainy days that you really need to
Mhm.
draw down, but then there are other times we need to build up. And also just, really being really, I think every organization has to stay as lean as possible, but you really need to ensure that, everyone is being utilized to their greatest potential. It's very difficult to have, people who aren't being fully utilized in a nonprofit because, you just don't have that luxury in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And speaking about like kind of the resourcing, what has kind of been a point of difference, or what have you learned about leading a nonprofit, mission-driven organization versus the Wall Street environment?
Yeah, I think you really need to lean into ensuring that people are really focused on the mission because at the end of the day you're a mission driven organization and you have to interact a lot with the your funders as well as the recipients of whatever your mission is, and so you really want people who are really invested and can really represent the organization well. Because I think that's one of the other things that, I think everyone in a nonprofit generally represents the organization in some way or some place. Whereas, particularly in corporate, you can be in your department and you're the back office or the front office and the two generally don't mix. Whereas in a
Yeah.
nonprofit, there's really not as big of a delineation.
Interesting. So, looking a little ahead, what's something that you wish kind of more of us understood about, the finance role in social impact work?
I think that, to be honest, the accounting is very similar. There are some key fundamental differences. One, revenue recognition. You recognize all of the grant the year is made. Um, reserves. How do you account for reserves? Discounting future pledges. So there are some intricacies and some things that are really focused. Depending on the size of the organization, we're over the threshold, so we get audited every year. And clearly at Merrill, we were audited, but I really didn't have a lot of access or
Yeah.
exposure to that because it's such a large organization. But in a smaller a nonprofit, clearly we work with others, but you have to call on almost every part of the organization when we're doing that. So
Mhm.
I think that the exposure that you get, regardless of what department you're in, is so much higher than what you would get at a larger organization or for a profit organization.
Do you find that motivations are higher amongst team members to contribute? Often, the larger organization you get, the perception out there is that people become a little less motivated. I don't know if I truly agree with that. But when you're in a mission-driven organization, people are there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And what do you find from that perspective?
I would say if people are at the organization for the right reason,
Hmm.
there are people who aren't really in it for the mission. And so I think it's much more difficult for them to really stay engaged or be engaged. For me, one of the, it's like I don't get to get out in the field as often, but when I do get to go to a, food distribution site or one of our partner sites and see, the people who are recipients, it is very touching. And
Yeah.
it really gives you motivation to really work harder and do things. And if you're not motivated by that, it's very hard, I think, sometimes to stay engaged.
And so, as you think about that and translating that motivation into the evolving role of world of finance, and I'd even ask about and a little bit about AI here. Like, how do you think about that kind of role of finance in contributing to the long term growth of Rethink Foods, and how are you thinking about bringing AI and things to bear that can help either increase those revenues or decrease that bottom line?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really on a mission to automate as much as possible.
Yeah.
Um, clearly, I think a lot of organizations, you're a resource contained, restrained. And then also, just from the interest of your people, you know, accounting finance has historically been, heavy, kind of grunt work, so to speak,
Yeah.
and really focus on where can we automate as much as possible. AP, AR, financial system, forecasting, modeling. Where can you automate as much as possible? Where can you use AI to give you insights so that our people spend more time actually with the business leaders, helping them to truly understand their business, helping them to understand their finances, helping them to make better decisions. So for me, that's the goal, that's the focus, and that's what I'm really trying to add more automation, more tool, particularly technology tools, so they will free up my people's time so that they can spend more time on like some more higher margin value added activities.
Well, it sounds very similar to most businesses, Chris. I'm not hearing anything that I wouldn't expect to hear from a typical CFO. Um, so as you're thinking about kind of, we talked a little bit before about advising someone. What advice would you give someone entering the nonprofit space in a finance role, maybe a CFO level, but also maybe in more junior levels? Like, what could you tell them from your experience?
Yeah, I would say that, really go into it with a mindset of, how can I really add value to the business? How, and to be honest, like I said, I don't, because I have, before worked at Merrill, I was a consultant.
Really?
After Merrill, I was a consultant for a while. So I think, how do you add value to the business? How do I learn about the business? And then, how do I engage other people in the business, particularly if you have a business background or a for-profit business background, and the majority of the people you're working with, have a traditional nonprofit background? How can I really impart sound business principles and practices to people who may or may not have had that experience before? Because I think, particularly department heads and people who lead certain areas and particularly programs. So how do I come in? And I think if you come in with that mindset and think for that mindset, you will be very valuable to the organization. You will help the organization tremendously. But then I'll also say, take the time to get out of the office, out of finance, and really interact with the recipients of whatever your program is, uh, and kind of really live the mission also, because I think it's so much more rewarding, or can be more rewarding than pushing papers or whatever you do in your day to day job.
Yeah, I mean, could you share any stories with us about, when you've gotten out of the office and what you've learnt or experienced that has had a major impact on you and your contributions?
Sure, I will say that just being there, like I said, because we deal with food, and we understand how food can transform persons. It is transformative. Um, it's to me, it's very hard to get a job, work, particularly if you're concerned about your family. So just being, for example, some of our food distribution sites, partners, churches, just being there, talking to the people who are recipients, some people who are working, but they're not, New York is a very expensive city.
Yeah.
So, being able to have, that meal given to them and they can share some of that with their family, it does help them to stretch their budget. It does help them to, to continue to improve themselves. And just hearing those stories and understand that, a lot of people, are really hard workers. But, like I said, New York is an expensive city to live. And, just giving that helping hand or being able to receive that helping hand is very transformative in people's lives.
And if any of our listeners are listening, how could they get involved? In any of the work that you do.
Sure. So, you can always donate to us, of course. But if you don't, but also we have a community kitchen on 116 West Houston here in New York City. We always love to have volunteers. We have the community kitchen. That's where our excess food is brought, unloaded. We have volunteers who help sort things, who help cut vegetables, who help make meals. And then we also have an event center in the front. If people ever want to host events, we can definitely host that also for a nominal fee, of course. And then, so there are plenty of ways to help us. And also, if you want to volunteer with any of the organizations we support, we can facilitate that also.
Awesome. And, I think, we typically have listeners that are, maybe not at the CFO level already. If you could impart some of your advice from your experiences in both for profit and not for profit, what advice would you give an aspiring CFO?
So I would say, so just to give you a little bit about my fourth background. So I think I mentioned I'm originally from Alabama. But my first job out of college was as a bank examiner with the comptroller of currency. I worked in consulting, but then I realized I wanted to be a CFO. So I was like, how do I do that? So I joined Merrill Lynch in the internal financial department, and I was fortunate in the sense that I was able to move around in different areas. So the first thing I would say that one, actually stepping back a little more, when I was an undergrad, one of the best advice Dr. Zampano, who was my finance professor, gave me was finance is great, but take as much accounting as you can because accounting is the language of business. So first thing I would say, learn as much accounting as you can. Then if you can get an organization where you can work in different departments, where you can see every aspect of CFO, controllership, FP&A, treasury, competitor analysis, if you can do that, I think it's a great experience, great training ground. So I would say, definitely try to figure out what jobs, what areas you can to get exposure to the great, all the major aspects. But also, I think one of the things that, a controller is different from a CFO, and you really do need to do something to gain a strategic mindset. For me, it's being a consultant. When I was at Ernst& Young, I worked in restructuring organizations. I worked with companies in financial distress. So you deal with a lot of strategic issues there. So I think, also think about how can you get that strategic mindset because you really are a true partner with the CEO, and how do you really provide value to them?
That's great advice. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. And folks, that's going to be a wrap here on today's episode of the Next CFO. Thank you for letting me host today as a stopgap for Matt. Chris, you've been amazing. I really appreciate it. And for those listening again, Rethink Foods is the organization for Chris, and please go and figure out how you can help. It's a great mission-driven organization, and really appreciate you listening.
Well, thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chris.